Welcome to today's debriefing, where we have very strong feelings and about everything, as usual. But first, wanted to mention that this week on H&H we announced the premiere for the mid-season second half of Outlander, which will be in April. I forget the exact date. But speaking of Outlander and of other books, today's morning coffee was a post about whether or not people like first person or not. And it used to be in the past that first person was pretty much anathema to anybody that didn't read chick lit or maybe gothics or whatever. But with the rise of new adult and some twisting of the genres, first person is getting to be much more acceptable. So I posed today, do you still feel the same way about first person? Turns out everybody still feels very strongly about it. I love first person. My I guess iconic book, whatever, is Jane Eyre, and that's told in first person. And ever since then, I've always loved it. I wrote a book in first person, and I just recently finished Mia Gabriel's Lord Savage, which is a gothic historical in first person, Outlanders in first person, and there are many examples in new adult and I think young adult. So I love it. I'm all over it. But others at H&H think differently. Jen?
The other would be me. I am not a fan of first person. For me, it usually is an indicator that we will be following the same couple or the same person from book to book. And that's just, we were talking about auto buys this week. That's an auto not buy for me if I think that it's going to be the same couple with very few exceptions. So that's why first person is really just kind of a hot button for me. I don't mind being in the same person's head over and over, but or throughout one book. But it does either have to be a standalone book or it has to be a series where it hops from one person's first person from book to book. An example of that for me is Samantha Young, and that is pretty much the only exception that I have. If it's in first person, it has to be by Samantha Young for me to buy it. So yeah, that's kind of where I stand. Jane Eyre is a classic for me, and I reread it every few years, but it's just first person is not for me. I cannot stand it. It's an auto not buy.
And for once I don't have strong feelings about something, I am kind of middle of the road. Sometimes it works for me, sometimes it doesn't. I was thinking of how much I love the YA series His Fair Assassins, and I love the first book. I love the first book so much. It follows our heroine Ismay, and her book was amazing, and the second book was amazing. They're all really great books, but I find I get a little confused when it's a first person, which is so intimate. It's a first person perspective of a story, and there are other characters mentioned, and then when they get their own book and it's also first person, that feels very intimate, but I'm used to being on another side with them, so it's weird to suddenly be in their head, and for the first heroine to then be like outside of my, I'm so used to getting her intimate perspective that it's confusing to me to have her feel more distant in another book. So I find that I get a little confused, and that could just be because I have a terrible memory, but I get a little confused about, oh right, whose head exactly am I in right now? Because I was so used to being in Ismay's, and now all of a sudden I'm in Sabella's. So stuff like that, I guess I get a little easily confused when they're all tied together, but I quite like sometimes, your standalone first-person stories. It's just kind of a different way to get the story, to feel really involved in it, and I think if it serves the story well, I'm along for the ride. So basically I could go either way on that. Sometimes I like it, sometimes I don't love it, and sometimes I will like the individual book, but then the whole series I kind of will wish that it had been in third person or something, just because I'm easily confused. I don't know.
What I find even more confusing, which I see a lot with first person, and especially in new adult, I feel, is that they'll have the heroine's perspective in first person and the hero's perspective in third person. And that, unless it's done really well, is another no-go for me. So
or
I think
I've
also
seen
mixing
kind of first
POV.
person for both, but then it'll just have the name at the top.
Yeah.
And if you read really quickly by that, you didn't catch that, and you're like, oh, right, I need to remember I'm in his head now, or something.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's right. Well, H&H audience, we would love to know where you stand on this topic. Do you feel very strongly pro first person? Are you anti first person? Or are you more like me and it really just kind of depends on the situation, the book, the author? Let us know, and we look forward to hearing from you in the comments on the site and on YouTube. Have a great week, everyone, and we'll see you next Friday. Bye.
Thanks. Bye.